So there he was. He had the opportunity. The man who had killed his father had now married and was sleeping with his mother and had taken the kingship from him, was there kneeling before him. And Hamlet had a sword, and he could have killed him. He could have killed Claudius, who had done these terrible deeds. He was vulnerable, right there, in prayer, absorbed, hoping that the words that he was offering up would somehow open up the gates of forgiveness for what he had done. But Hamlet didn't kill him, not then. Because Hamlet was afraid that even though this man had acted vilely and evilly, he was afraid that because he was in the act of prayer, that somehow if Hamlet killed him at that time, this man's evil soul would be granted entrance into heaven, should he be killed in the act of prayer. It was as if his religious right at that time protected Claudius from the moral judgment that he so richly deserved. There is just something about religion and about being engaged in religious worship that we feel somehow sends a protective shield around that person, so that no matter what they have done or how they have acted, they are somehow protected by their religion. Shakespeare, marvelous playwright, creative and wonderfully insightful, didn't invent this particular problem, though. In fact, we see something somewhat similar going back, give or take how you count these things, a couple of thousands of years in our Bible, in the first book of Kings, in the 2nd chapter. What is happening there? David, on his deathbed, instructs Solomon about who were the men he could trust, who are the ones he should spare, and who are the ones that he recommended quite strongly that Solomon go out and kill right away, as Solomon prepares to take the kingship from his father. And among the men that David has it in for is a gentleman by the name of Joab. Joab is not some minor character in David's life or in this part of our Israelite history. Joab was a central character. He was one of David's most trusted captains. He helped David. He oversaw most all of David's campaigns when David was king. He was even mishpacha. He was his family. He was his nephew. But Joab had killed 2 men, one named Abner and the other named Amasa. He killed 2 men who David had made explicit instructions he should not kill. And he didn't even kill them in battle. He killed them in peacetime. And he brought blood guilt down upon David, upon his house, upon his kingship. And David found that unacceptable. And so David said to his son Solomon, "Clear the way when you take up being king. Rid yourself of this blood guilt that this man brought upon my house, and by extension, upon you." David dies, and Solomon takes his words to heart. And Joab hears of it, hears that Solomon now is going to come to kill him. And where does Joab run? Where is the safest place to go? Into the temple. Right into where they're offering up sacrifices. And he goes into the main courtyard and he grabs the horns of the altar. And he says, "Come kill me if you will, because I'm only going to die here. You're never getting me out." He was, in a sense, giving ancient meaning to this word, seeking sanctuary in the sanctuary. So, Solomon sends one of his trusted generals. He says to Benahu, he says, "Go kill him." And Benahu goes. And he finds Yoav there holding the altar, holding on to it, saying, come here and kill me if you will, but I'm not leaving. And Bernhard doesn't know what to do, because once again we see there's that aura of protection that being close to, part of, or somehow touched by this religious rite and worship provides. And so Bernhard does what every smart general should do. If you don't know what you need to do, go ask the king. So he goes to the king. He says, what do I do? And Solomon, without hesitation, says, go and kill him. So guess what Bernhard does? Does what every smart general should do. Listens to the king. And he goes and he takes, gosh, let me learn the guy's name. Thank you. He takes Yoav out from the sanctuary and he kills him right there on the spot. And so the blood guilt is removed. Now let me ask you something. Why is it that Bernhard hesitated, but Solomon didn't? When he sees Yoav holding on to the altar, he doesn't know what to do. He has that sense that he's protected by religion. And so he hesitates and he goes to the king. But Solomon doesn't hesitate at all. According to the text, Bernhard comes in and Solomon says, go kill him. Do it right now. And he does so. Why doesn't Solomon hesitate? A number of different reasons can be suggested. I'll give you the easiest one. Because Solomon's bar mitzvah was Parshat Mishpatim. And that meant that Solomon read Parshat Mishpatim. And that means that he knew that in chapter 21, verse 14, it says explicitly, and if a murderer comes into my house and grabs onto the horns of my altar, you shall take him out and you shall kill him. Solomon knew some Torah, for he was obligated, as all the kings of Israel are obligated, to keep the Torah right next to them, to study it and know it. So you see, using religion to protect us from the ills and wrongs that we've committed wasn't new to Shakespeare, wasn't even new to Solomon. They wrote that law in the Torah because they needed to, because there have always been people who have sought to use their religion or their ideology or their dogma or their belief as a way to justify, cover, or protect them from their immoral actions. And here the Torah comes along and it says it crystal clear. Don't even think it. How dare you, the Torah seems to be saying. How dare you desecrate my sacred sanctuary with your immorality and think that I will offer you protection just because this is a place of worship. On the contrary, a place of worship does not afford protection from immorality. Place of worship is where we realize that this is where we cannot do such deeds, and such deeds will not be permitted or justified or accepted. So we see within the Torah something quite remarkable. We see that even within the Torah itself, as important as our religious worship is, as we see all the verses that the Torah devotes towards proper religious worship, the Torah still has an eye and a vision towards the bigger picture. And it understands, as we see in Leviticus in chapter 19, when God says, you shall be holy, for I, your God, am holy. And what follows after that are a series of moral instructions, including even the one that most of us are most familiar with, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, indicating that when Torah speaks of holiness, the clearest manifestation of holiness, the most important manifestation of holiness, is not what happens in the sanctuary, but what happens outside the sanctuary, by how we treat one another, how we act towards one another, how we look upon our world. That's where holiness at its highest level, according to the Torah, must be found. And therefore, the Torah is willing to see its own worship service disturbed and interrupted in order to make sure that someone like Yoav cannot use his religion as a shield. The rabbis will take this even further, and they'll say, you know something? Even if the worship service is going on at that very moment, even if they're in the midst of offering up sacrifices, uttering prayers and praise, you go, you take that person out of that room, and you kill him right away. Now let us ask ourselves, why? Why do this? Why would the Torah put a morality that needs to apply to all humanity over a worship service that focuses on our particular obligations towards God? I think on one level, the Torah refuses to allow religious right to gain priority over moral right. But beyond that, I think that there is something deeper that is going on. And this was opened up to me when I was reading the work of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi of Great Britain. In a book called The Dignity of Difference, he makes a fascinating comment and observation. He notes that if you look at the word moral, one of the ways that we see it used in another context is when we speak about someone who is down, whose spirit is low. And what's the word that we use for someone who's down, whose spirit's low? We say that they are depressed. Yes, but that doesn't have anything to do with the word moral, now does it? Work with me here, people, work with me. Thank you. Right? That a person who is down, who sees no hope for the future, we refer to them as being, thank you. They're demoralized. So let's ask ourselves, interesting, what is the connection between moral and demoralized? And he offers the following thought. He points out that going back 4,000 years, people looked and experienced the world. They looked at and experienced a world that seemed to be impersonal, uncaring, and unfeeling. And they were anxious about this world because so much was beyond their control. And so what ancient people did is they personified the gods. They personified these forces in their gods. And then they came up with rites and rituals that they could offer up to their gods as a way of placating those gods, and thereby hoping in some small way to gain some control over those impersonal forces that surrounded them. But the Torah came along with a different worldview and a different response to the impersonal, chaotic world in which we live. The Torah came along and it asserted that we are in fact not powerless in the face of the impersonal. Because what we do, the Torah asserts, matters. And that's what morality is about. It's about that assertion and that understanding and that deep belief that just this, what we do makes a difference. What we do, how we treat our friends, our families, our associates, our communities, helps us create nurturing relationships, marriage, family, friendship, and communities that give us the strength to face the impersonal and uncertain world in which we live. This is the Torah's view. Our morality, our behaving well, doesn't protect us as if some kind of charm or talisman against evil. We know this to be true. We see it all the time. We see good people who suffer undeserving fates. So morality doesn't protect us in this way. But when we are moral, we create the kind of relationships such that when the chaos of the world breaks through the order we try to impose, when that chaos breaks through, there are people there to help us. Because of our morality, we have fostered relationships that create a safety net. It can't block out the bad that happens, but it has hands that can hold us as we endure it. And it is in this way, that being moral is a radical step. Because being moral is ultimately about having hope, about saying back to the world, I see you, I can't control you, and I can't placate you, nor am I going to enter some kind of game where I try. but I can live a life that is meaningful, that gives me a sense of something well lived, so that when you come at me, I do not stand alone. In this sense, morality does help us. And in this sense, morality does give us hope as we face a very uncertain future. There is a Hasidic teaching. There is a Hasidic teaching that says there are, building off of the very famous phrase, Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed, that there are three things upon which the world stands. Torah, Avodah, Ugimilut Chasadim. Torah, teaching, Avodah, service, worship, and Gimilut Chasadim, ethical, good, loving, kind deeds. And the Hasidic teaching goes on and says, as the end approaches, as the Messiah comes closer, the first two pillars will shrink. Torah and service will become smaller. Only good deeds will grow. Only our righteousness will continue to shine forth. Just as the prophet says, and Zion shall be redeemed with justice. So today, as you leave the sanctuary, where no one is holding on to the altar but ourselves, our small selves that don't realize how much power we have, I charge you, go out there and do good. Not be nice. Do good. Consider how you speak to the people you know and love, and the ones you don't know, and even the ones that you don't love. Consider how you consume the resources of this world, knowing that there is a right way and a wrong way, a better, more whole, humane way, and the less humane way. Consider how it is that you act towards the people around you, and you too will be sheltered from the storm that may hit, that hits all of us. But you know that you will never face it alone, because your deeds should give you hope. Shabbat Shalom.